Rachel McKinley, a young widow, faces humiliation on Christmas Eve when diner owner Mr. Grant refuses her family service, deeming them unfit for his respectable establishment. Her children, Lily and Noah, witness the ordeal, their innocence marred by shame. As they leave, two Marines observe silently, hinting at a deeper connection. A viral video of the incident sparks outrage among local veterans, linking Rachel to fallen hero Sergeant Michael McKinley. What unfolds next? Will the Marines' loyalty to their brother's widow ignite justice? Or will Rachel's quiet dignity remain unnoticed in a town quick to judge? If Rachel's story touched you, support our channel. Like, share, and subscribe to uncover more stories of resilience and justice. Your support amplifies voices like Rachel's, proving kindness triumphs. Join our community today and help us honor those who stand tall despite hardship. Thank you. The biting wind howled through the streets of Jacksonville, North Carolina, carrying with it a flurry of snowflakes that danced under the dim glow of Christmas Eve lights. Inside a cramped apartment, Rachel McKinley sat at a small, scarred kitchen table, her fingers trembling as she counted the crumpled bills in her worn leather wallet. $2,347. That was all that remained after paying the heating bill that morning, a necessity to keep the frigid winter at bay for her two young children. At 29, Rachel's face bore the weight of a woman much older, etched with lines of quiet resilience and a determination that refused to bow to the relentless grind of hardship. Her hazel eyes, once bright with dreams, now carried a steady, unyielding resolve, tempered by 3 years of widowhood and the constant struggle to provide for her family. "Mom, are we still going out tonight?" came a small, hopeful voice from the doorway. 7-year-old Lily stood there, her wide eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and uncertainty, her dark curls peeking out from under a red knit hat. Behind her, 5-year-old Noah clung tightly to a tattered stuffed bear, a precious keepsake from his father, Sergeant Michael McKinley, who had been taken from them in a transport accident 3 years prior. The memory of that day, the somber knock at the door, the chaplain's gentle voice, the notification officer's stiff posture, still lingered like a shadow in Rachel's heart, a wound that throbbed with every glance at her children's faces. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course we're going," she said, her voice soft but firm, as she zipped up Noah's jacket and adjusted Lily's hat. "It's Christmas Eve after all. We're going to make it special." The loss of Michael had shattered their world, leaving Rachel to navigate the wreckage alone. The life insurance had barely covered the funeral and a portion of their mounting medical debt, vanishing quickly under the relentless pressure of daily survival. Rachel worked grueling night shifts at a local convenience store, her hands moving mechanically as she scanned items and smiled at customers, all while her heart ached for the children she left sleeping under the care of Mrs. Abernathy, their kind but frail neighbor. Every dollar was meticulously accounted for, every purchase scrutinized, every small luxury postponed indefinitely. But tonight was different. Christmas Eve demanded a moment of joy, a fleeting memory for Lily and Noah to hold on to through the long, cold winter. A proper dinner at a restaurant, even if it was just this once. The Cornerstone Diner on Main Street glowed like a beacon in the frozen night, its fogged-up windows promising warmth and comfort. Rachel had chosen it with care, poring over the menu online to ensure it fit her razor-thin budget. The children's special, priced at $5.99, meant all three of them could eat for just under $20, including a modest tip. As they stepped inside, the bell above the door jingled cheerfully, and the scent of fried onions and fresh coffee enveloped them. Lily's eyes sparkled at the sight of twinkling Christmas decorations draped across the ceiling, while Noah pointed excitedly at a glass case filled with pies and cakes, his small face alight with wonder. Rachel guided them to a corner booth, hoping to blend into the background, her worn coat and the children's mended clothes making her feel exposed under the diner's fluorescent lights. A waitress approached, her smile distracted as she set down glasses of water and handed them menus before hurrying off to another table. Rachel's gaze flickered briefly to the far corner, where two young men sat, their casual clothes doing little to conceal their military posture. They sipped coffee as silence, their eyes occasionally scanning the room with a quiet alertness. Rachel ordered carefully, the smallest adult meal for herself and the children's specials for Lily and Noah. As the waitress walked away, Rachel allowed herself a moment to exhale, imagining the warmth of a shared meal, the sound of her children's laughter filling the space between them. But the moment was short-lived. Mr. Grant, the diner's owner, emerged from the kitchen, his broad frame casting a shadow as he surveyed the room. His eyes landed on Rachel's table, and his expression hardened, a storm brewing in his narrowed gaze. He strode toward them, his steps heavy with purpose, and stopped at their booth. "Excuse me," he said, his voice loud enough to carry across the diner, sharp with an edge of disdain. "Those kids better not make a mess." Rachel's heart sank, but she nodded quickly, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her chest. "They won't, sir. They know how to behave." Mr. Grant's eyes swept over her, taking in her threadbare coat, the faint patches on Lily's sweater, the scuffed toes of Noah's shoes. "Can you even afford to eat here?" he pressed, his tone slicing through the hum of the diner. The room fell silent, the clatter of silverware and murmur of conversation fading as nearby customers turned their attention to their plates, their discomfort palpable. Rachel's throat tightened, but she met his gaze, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, I have enough." "This isn't a charity case," Mr. Grant snapped, his voice rising, each word a hammer blow to Rachel's carefully guarded dignity. "This isn't a place for single mothers and hungry kids. We run a respectable establishment." The words hung in the air, heavy and cruel. Noah's lower lip quivered, his small hand tightening around his stuffed bear as he shrank into the booth. Lily stared at the tablecloth, her cheeks burning with shame, her earlier excitement snuffed out like a candle in the wind. Rachel's face flushed with a mix of humiliation and quiet fury, but she stood slowly, her movements deliberate, her spine straight despite the weight pressing down on her. "We'll go," she said, her voice steady but laced with a sorrow she couldn't fully hide. "I'm sorry to have bothered you." As she guided her children toward the door, their small hands clutching hers, the snow outside began to pile up on the sidewalk, a cold mirror to the chill settling in her heart. Not a single voice rose in their defense. The other diners remained silent, their eyes averted, their kindness stifled by the fear of confrontation. In the corner, one of the young Marines, Martinez, started to rise from his seat, his jaw tight with anger. But his companion grabbed his arm, muttering, "Not now, Martinez, not tonight." Rachel didn't see the exchange, her focus solely on shielding her children from the sting of rejection as they stepped back into the freezing night. Back in their apartment, Rachel closed the door behind them, the faint warmth of the space doing little to thaw the ice that had settled in her bones. It wasn't the December cold that chilled her. It was the memory of her children's faces as they were ushered out of the diner, confusion and shame etched into their young features. Lily's hopeful smile had vanished, replaced by a quiet resignation that broke Rachel's heart. Noah clung to his bear, his small body trembling, not from the carnival, but from the unspoken question in his eyes. "Why don't they want us?" Rachel knelt before them, pulling them close, her arms a fragile shield against a world that seemed determined to break them. "We're okay," she whispered, more to herself than to them, her voice cracking under the weight of her own doubt. "We're going to be okay." In that moment, Rachel's heart ached with the familiar sting of sacrifice, the silent dignity she wore like armor. She had walked this path before, choosing grace over anger, endurance over despair. But as she held her children, she wondered if her quiet strength could ever awaken the compassion in others, or if kindness, like so many other things in her life, would remain just out of reach. Rachel's chest tightened as she watched her 6-year-old daughter, Lily, nudge a fragment of stale Christmas cookie across her plate, her small fingers quivering, not from the cold that seeped through their thinly insulated apartment, but from the quiet bravery she was trying to summon. "I'm not hungry, Mommy," Lily murmured, her voice barely above a whisper, though her wide, dark eyes betrayed the hunger she was too young to fully conceal. At 6, she had already learned to protect her mother from worry, a realization that sent a sharp ache through Rachel's heart every time she saw it. Noah, her 8-year-old son, lifted his gaze from his own cookie, his brow creased with unspoken questions. His eyes, so like his father's, searched Rachel's face, silently asking if they were to blame for the harsh words that had driven them from the Cornerstone Diner into the biting chill of Christmas Eve night. Kneeling to meet Noah's eyes, Rachel rested her hands gently on his shoulders, her touch a wordless vow to keep him safe. "No, sweetheart," she said, her voice calm despite the storm of guilt and grief raging inside her. "You and Lily didn't do anything wrong. Some people just lose their way of being kind, and that's not about us. It's not about you. It's about them." Her words were as much a shield for her children as for herself, a fragile thread of hope she clung to in a world that seemed intent on unraveling her. Standing, she crossed to the tiny kitchenette, her steps measured as she opened a battered cardboard box on the counter. Inside were Christmas cookies from the church food pantry, their edges crumbling, the red and green frosting dulled but still festive, a small gift of kindness from strangers. With the reverence one might reserve for a fine dining experience, Rachel arranged the broken pieces on a plate, her hands shaking as she summoned a smile she hoped would reach her eyes. "Look at this," she said, her tone bright despite the effort it took to sustain it. "Christmas cookies for dinner. Can you imagine anything better than this? It's better than anything we could have gotten at a fancy restaurant, don't you think?" Lily and Noah nodded, their small faces lighting up as they joined in the charade, their small faces brightening with the pretense that this was a grand adventure, not a necessity born of bare cupboards and a bank account pushed beyond its breaking point. They nibbled on at the cookies, the faint crunch echoing in the hushed stillness of their apartment, and Rachel's eyes wandered to the corner of the room. There, a cardboard box held the remnants of a life that felt like a fading dream, photo albums, a carefully folded Marine Corps flag, and mementos of Michael, her husband, whose absence was a wound that never fully ceased to ache. Atop the pile was a framed photograph of Michael in his Marine Corps dress blues, his smile broad and warm, the corners of his eyes crinkling in a way that echoed Noah's own when he laughed. In his distinctive handwriting, the words, "For those we leave behind," were scrawled across the bottom, a phrase that was both anchored Rachel's heart and pierced it, a testament to his devotion and the unbearable weight of his sacrifice. The next morning arrived with an unforeseen sharpness, dawn breaking over a town that had been stirred by a single moment of cruelty. Unknown to Rachel, someone at the diner had recorded Mr. Grant's outburst, the video spreading like wildfire across local social media channels. Each share brought a deluge of comments, some vicious, others empathetic, all picking apart a moment that had fractured Rachel's quiet dignity. "What kind of mother drags her kids out for sympathy meals?" one commenter scoffed, their words laced with scorn. "Restaurants aren't welfare handouts," another chimed in, their judgment cold and unyielding. But there were also those whose voices pushed back with kindness. "I've been where she is," wrote a woman named Sarah, her word raw with shared experience. "It's hard enough to survive without people piling on. Those kids were better behaved than half the regulars." In a private Marine Corps veterans group online, the video ignited a different kind of dialogue, sparked by a user with the handle DesertDog78, who posted, "McKinley, does anyone recall that name, that ring a bell? Wasn't he with us in Fallujah?" The question set off a flurry of messages, old bonds reigniting as his service records were checked and memories pieced together. Within hours, a text message with a link to the video reached Major John H. Reeves at Camp Lejeune, just outside Jacksonville, carrying a name that struck him like a blow. Michael McKinley, the Marine who had pulled 2 wounded comrades from a blazing Humvee, giving his life to save theirs. Across town, Mr. Grant, the diner's owner, faced the mounting criticism with defiance, his posture unyielding. In a clipped statement to a local news outlet, he stated, "My establishment business has the right to refuse service to anyone. We have standards, and we uphold them." His words were resolute, unapologetic, as if the matter were closed. Rachel, though, remained unaware of the digital maelstrom that had engulfed her family's Christmas Eve ordeal. When a reporter reached out for her comment, she deflected with a soft, "No thank you, I'm not interested." Instead, she bundled up her children and took them to the community church's Christmas service, where the glow of candles and the melody of hymns offered a fleeting escape from her pain. Afterward, while Lily and Noah's children played with others at the church's free Christmas meal program, Rachel retreated to the kitchen to volunteer, her hands steady as she scrubbed pots, the rhythm anchoring, keeping her grief from overtaking her at bay. The kitchenette coordinator, a warm woman named Martha, smiled at the children and said, "Your mom's doing such wonderful things for helping us out so much. You must be so proud." Lily nodded, her expression grave, and said, "Mom says when you've known what it's like to be hungry, you help feed others when you can," she said, her voice imbued with a wisdom that seemed far beyond her tender age. On the day after Christmas, Rachel sat at her modest kitchenette table, her fingers brushing over the stark edges of a utility notice. The words "Final Warning" glared in bold letters screamed at her, outlining a winter surcharge that had shattered her fragile financial balance. She hurriedly folded the paper, slipping it into her pocket as Lily and Noah emerged from the bedroom, their faces still soft with the innocence of sleep. "Is it cold outside today too?" Noah asked, clutching his fraying blanket around his shoulders tighter. The apartment's thermostat was dialed down to 62 degrees to stretch their meager budget, but Rachel couldn't bear to confess how close they were to collapse. "Just a touch chilly," she replied, her voice airy with false cheer. "We'll bundle up under blankets later and dive into stories. It'll be nice and cozy." Lily gazed at her mother, her head tilted, her eyes searching. "Mom, does Dad know about what happened at the restaurant?" "Does?" she asked, her voice soft. "Can he see us from heaven?" Rachel's throat tightened, grief threatening to overwhelm her. "I think he sees the things that matter most," she whispered, her voice faltering. "He sees how brave you both are and Noah's strength." Meanwhile, at the Cornerstone Diner across town, the diner hummed with its usual post-Christmas lunch bustle. Mr. Grant weaved through the dining room, offering perfunctory smiles to regulars, his sharp orders to the waitstaff unchanged by the online controversy. The video had drawn a handful of negative remarks online, but his steadfast customers seemed largely unfazed, their conversations mingling with the clatter of plates and the murmur of familiarity. But outside, however, a dark green military vehicle rolled into the parking lot, its tires crunching against the frost-covered gravel, its presence quiet but heavy with purpose, like the distant roll of thunder heralding a gathering storm. The diner fell silent as a cold gust swept through the open door. Two Marines in crisp service uniforms stepped inside, their presence commanding attention. Unlike the off-duty soldiers who often lounged in Jacksonville's diners, these men moved with purpose, their eyes scanning the room. Conversations hushed, curious glances followed. One Marine nodded to his partner, who briefly stepped outside, returning with a third figure, Major John H. Reeves, his rank insignia catching the light, his authority palpable. Mr. Grant emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his grease-streaked apron. His usual confidence wavered as he met the Marine's steady gazes. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked, a tremor of unease in his voice. Major Reeves' response was calm but firm. "Mr. Grant, we'd like a word." In a corner booth, the Major placed a photograph on the table with reverence. It showed a young Marine grinning broadly, his arm around a comrade in a dusty war zone. "Do you recognize this Marine?" the Major asked. Mr. Grant studied the image, the Marine's smile unfamiliar. "Should I?" he replied, confusion creasing his brow. "Sergeant Michael McKinley," the Major said evenly. "He died 3 years ago, leaving a wife and 2 children. The same family you refused service to on Christmas Eve." Mr. Grant's face paled, his hands gripping the table. He remembered that night, the woman, the kids, the cold. He hadn't thought twice about turning them away. "I didn't know who they were," he said, his voice faltering. "Exactly," Major Reeves replied, his tone steady but piercing. "You didn't know Sergeant McKinley saved 5 Marines in an ambush. You didn't know he earned the Bronze Star posthumously. You didn't know his widow has been working 2 jobs to feed her children." He leaned closer. "We Marines know hunger, Mr. Grant, but we never turn away the needy, especially not the family of a man who gave his life." Mr. Grant sat speechless, the photograph's silent accusation burning into him. He wanted to protest, but shame silenced him. By afternoon, a sign appeared in the diner's window, authorized by the Veterans Association. "Refuse service to the children of a fallen hero." Regulars vanished, tourists walked away, and the diner grew quiet. By evening, Mr. Grant stood alone, the emptiness a stark reflection of his actions' cost. Across town, Rachel McKinley opened an envelope slipped under her apartment door. The Marine Corps stationery held a letter. Mrs. McKinley, we owed your husband our lives. Now we repay that debt. Semper Fidelis is our promise. Michael's brothers. Inside was a box with grocery gift cards, warm clothes for her children, and educational savings bonds. Rachel's heart swelled with gratitude and grief, feeling Michael's presence in the Marine's kindness. That evening, Noah tried on his new blue and red jacket, his eyes serious. "Mom, can I be a Marine like Dad?" Rachel knelt, adjusting his collar, tears brimming. "Only if you protect others like these Marines protected us," she said. Lily hugged her mother, whispering, "We don't need that restaurant. We have each other." Rachel held them close, feeling justice arrive, not from courts, but from hearts that knew loss. Spring softened Jacksonville's winter scars. The Marines' support continued. Rachel was offered a post as a kitchen assistant supervisor at Camp Lejeune, with hours that fit her children's school schedule and better pay than her old job. "We need someone who understands service," the coordinator said. The base provided transportation, and weekends brought community events. Lily joined a reading club, while Noah learned from Marines who became his surrogate uncles. On Rachel's living room wall hung Michael's photo in dress blues, his smile eternal. Beside it, a new picture showed Rachel, Noah, and Lily with their Marine family, a testament to a future built on love and legacy. The crisp air bit at Rachel's fingertips as she stood shoulder to shoulder with her children, their small hands clutching hers tightly. They were surrounded by a sea of Marines, each standing at attention, their faces carved with a quiet reverence. All eyes were fixed on a simple wooden frame that held Michael's photograph, its engraved plate glinting faintly in the dim light. The words etched there struck Rachel's heart like a hammer. "You didn't just lose him. You inherited all of us." Her chest tightened with a mix of grief and gratitude, the weight of her husband's absence mingling with the unexpected strength of this newfound family. She could feel her children's trembling warmth beside her, their young minds grappling with the solemnity of the moment. They didn't fully understand the gesture, but they felt its gravity, and Rachel's heart swelled with pride for their resilience. She stood a little taller, her jaw set, determined to carry forward the legacy Michael had left behind, not just for her, but for them. Months later, the Cornerstone Diner reopened, its familiar neon sign flickering back to life under new management. The man at the helm was a retired Marine gunnery sergeant, a weathered figure who had once stood side by side with Michael in the chaos of battle. His presence brought a sense of purpose to the place, as if he were reclaiming it from the shadows of its past. His first act was to dedicate a hero's table, a sacred space forever reserved for the families of fallen service members. It was a simple gesture, but to Rachel it felt like a promise kept, a vow that no one would be turned away again. The table stood in the corner, adorned with a small flag and a framed poem, a quiet beacon of honor amidst the clatter of plates and the hum of conversation. The sergeant's second act was to offer Rachel a role as the weekend manager. The job wasn't just employment, it was redemption. Where she had once been shamed, she now held authority, her voice steady as she directed the staff, her heart quietly mending with each shift. She moved through the diner with purpose, her children's faces flashing in her mind, fueling her resolve to rebuild their lives one day at a time. Mr. Grant, the former owner, had vanished from the town like a ghost after a community boycott shuttered the diner for 2 months. His Christmas Eve cruelty, turning Rachel and her children away when they had nowhere else to go, had left a stain on the town's heart. Unable to bear the weight of their judgment, he sold the business and slipped away to a place where his actions weren't whispered about in grocery aisles or church pews. Before he left, though, he'd placed an unsigned card at Rachel's doorstep, tucked alongside a gift certificate for a substantial amount. It was an apology, but a cowardly one, lacking the courage to meet her eyes. Rachel held the card in her hands, her fingers tracing the edges as she wrestled with a storm of emotions. Anger, hurt, and a flicker of pity for a man too weak to own his mistakes. In the end, she donated the certificate to the base's family emergency fund, a quiet act of defiance. She didn't need his guilt to move forward. She had her own strength, in Michael's memory, to guide her. One evening, as Rachel oversaw the kitchen cleanup at the base, the clanging of pots and the hiss of steam filling the air, a young private approached her. His steps were hesitant, his eyes wide with a mix of nervousness and determination. "Mrs. McKinley," he began, his voice soft but steady, "I just wanted to say, my mom was a single parent too. What happened to you at that diner? It happened to us a lot." He straightened his shoulders, as if summoning the courage to say what had been weighing on him. "I used to think the Corps was just about fighting, but now I see it's about standing up for people who deserve to be served." His words hit Rachel like a wave, stirring memories of Michael's own quiet conviction. She saw it in the private's earnest face, that same fire she caught in her own reflection each morning, a determination to keep going, to do right no matter the pun. She smiled, her heart warming despite the ache that never fully left. "That's exactly what Michael would have said," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. In that moment, she felt a connection not just to her husband's memory, but to a larger purpose, one that bound her to this young man and the countless others who carried Michael's spirit forward. As Rachel drove home that night, the road stretched dark and quiet before her, the stars above a faint reminder of brighter days. She passed the Cornerstone Diner, its windows glowing with warmth. Through the glass, she saw families gathered, their laughter spilling into the night. Among them were several figures in military uniforms, their presence a quiet testament to the bonds forged in service. At the hero's table sat a young woman with a toddler, the child's tiny hands clutching a crayon as she scribbled on a placemat. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. Another widow, another family being honored rather than turned away. The sight filled her with a bittersweet pride, a reminder that some wounds heal not by forgetting, but by transforming pain into purpose. She drove on, her heart heavy but resolute, knowing that some meals are never served, yet they linger in memory, not for what was denied, but for who stood beside those who were turned away. For someone like me, Rachel's story cuts deep. It brings back memories of my own mother, her hands calloused from work, her eyes tired but fierce as she fought to keep us fed. There were nights when we had nothing but the kindness of strangers to lean on, their faces etched in my mind like stars in a dark sky. Rachel's story isn't just hers, it's a mirror for anyone who's ever felt invisible, yet kept going. It matters not because it's spread like wildfire online, but because it reveals a simple truth. Strength isn't always in the uniform. Sometimes it's in the quiet courage of a parent trying to put food on the table. If Rachel's story stirs something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let them know they're not alone. Their story has been told, and you can give it meaning.